Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Mohit, we call him Mo, Bhende. Mo co-founded Carrot in 2014 to make interviewing a job. Now with $41 million in funding, which is crazy, Carrot has created the category of interview engineering. The company has conducted over 60,000 technical interviews on behalf of clients, including Intuit, Wayfair, Indeed, and Pinterest. Prior to Carrot, Mo was an executive at Microsoft, leading product strategy at Xbox. Outside of work, you can find Mo spending time with his wife, coaching his kids' soccer team, and skiing as much as he can. In fact, the idea for Carrot was born on the slopes of Crystal Mountain. Welcome, Mo. I love that you're going to Crystal. Like today, you're
tomorrow.
in your ski clothes pretty much.
I am basically in ski gear right now.
Are you in ski gear all the time?
I wish if I could be, but...
You're getting ready for ski season. Here we go. Okay, well then I guess you can answer this. It's so ironic because I didn't know you were a skier. And my first question for you was mountains or water?
Mountains.
Clearly.
100%.
Yeah, obviously. What movie can you recite the lines to?
What movie can I recite the lines to?
I like that you've watched so much that you're like, oh my God, I know this.
You know, I am so into Succession right now, so I've kind of de-movied. But
Succession's so good. Are you done with it?
No. Oh, yeah, we just finished season 2, and I am just now waiting for season 3.
It's so good.
I love Back to the Future. I don't know if you want, I don't know if I can recite lines right now, but I've watched every Back to the Future 1, 2, 3 nonstop, probably 20 times.
Love it. What do you like to do to set yourself up for a great day?
I love to work out in the morning. I'm a morning person, and so I wake up in the morning, I do a little meditation, I work out, and then I always set a little list of goals in the morning.
Wow, every day?
Every day, yeah, and I have a little list and just,
How long have you been doing that?
15 years.
I try to learn from people, and I'm always leave here like inspired, and then I never do it.
Yeah, no, it's just how I run my day, and then I always have a nice to have and a kind of must have every day, and then I even improvise my list as the day goes on. As I learn more information, my list might change.
With a 4 and 7-year-old on top of it, like how do you?
Well, my 4 and 7-year-olds are waking up at 7:30, and so I think that's 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. That's my
your precious time.
That's my me time.
Nice. And what have you read, seen, or listened to that's shaped your life?
You know, I loved Satya Nadella's Hit Refresh book on a number of levels. So I spent a number of years at Microsoft, and what I love about it is he took the same people and gave them a new way of thinking, and they've just now produced outsized results. And so I'm just, super proud to be a Microsoft alum. And I think reading that book, because there were so many names that were familiar.
Yeah.
And I just realized, wow, we had a certain operating manual as a company. And as a leader, founder of a company, it just gave me a lot of inspiration for you can take a group of people, give people a way to think about the world and achieve kind of outsized results. And
I want to read that book.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give me the Cliff Notes later.
100%.
What is your worst habit?
My worst habit, I procrastinate a lot, and sometimes
it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like you're like aspirational, like
no,
how I want to be.
But I do procrastinate quite a bit. It's just kind of what I do.
Well, it's working for you, so maybe it's not a bad habit.
Intentional procrastination.
Yeah. I'm very intentional about my procrastination. That's just me. Okay, who would you most like to meet?
I'd love to meet, let's see, probably Brian Chesky at Airbnb. I just love I love the product that they've built.
Do you use it?
I love the design. Yeah, we use it. Yeah, I'd say pre-kids all the time. Post-kids, it's interesting. We're like now discovering hotels over Airbnb sometimes.
Usually it's the other way around because people want access to like a kitchen.
Yeah, but it's just easier sometimes. I think we're realizing to have the cleaning service.
Yeah, throw the towel.
Else. Yeah,
I get it.
I think that company and the values and how they've built it, it's really special.
Yeah. Final question, and then we will dig deep into you. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Extrovert. Yeah.
That was a dumb question. I'm like, duh. The minute that I met you, you and I had like a love fest, and we were like, blah, 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 like fast talking and kind of couldn't get enough. And we're both extroverts.
Well, interestingly, what I would say is I do derive that 6 to 7 a.m. is I get a lot of my energy through introversion and introspection and reflection. But I then kind of sharpshooter wise, if you will, come to the world and love creating relationships and meeting people.
Yeah.
But I need that me time every day.
Yeah.
And I've kind of had to engineer my life to give me that time.
What do you do for your workout?
So we now have a Peloton at home, and I do that. But I think it's evolving from going to the gym to just doing kind of floor exercises. I'm a sports guy. So in my dream workouts, I would just be playing basketball, playing soccer. But I think the reality when you have 2 small kids is, stay at home and get some stuff
And you're
done.
younger than me, so I'm not going to say this, but I will say this, that almost every man that I know that's getting injured in their late 30s plus is from playing basketball.
Is it?
Oh my gosh. I don't know what's happening, but I've had like a couple of friends have hip replacements that are young, and it's like playing hoops and like playing like they're still in high school and college, and
Think
it's
that they're still 20.
Well, because when you're playing sports, and I was an athlete growing up too, it's like when you're playing sports, you forget, and then you're like still playing aggressively. So
That's right.
maybe you just stick with the Peloton.
I'll try.
I'm gonna get the app, and then I will add you, and we will like.
Awesome. We'll go head to head.
We'll go head to head.
Nice.
Okay, so where did you grow up?
I grew up so my story is interesting.
Yeah, I want to hear.
My parents immigrated to the U.S. from India. I was born in Houston. And then at the age of 3 months, I was actually sent to India, and I lived with my grandparents till I was 4. My parents were still settling in this country, kind of figuring out life. My mom at that point was doing her residency. They lived apart for a couple of years until they could kind of finally get together in one city. And so I had kind of a non-traditional upbringing. I was raised by my grandparents in India, in Bombay, till I was 4. And I think that was an extremely kind of just shaping, defining part of
Do you remember it?
Well, I remembered insofar as I went to India every single summer until I was 20.
So you definitely remember that. But do you remember the 0 to 4 with your
There
grandparents?
are certain memories that I have with, I have this random memory of going to preschool there and kind of getting disciplined at one point. I don't know, maybe I was testing the boundaries of doing what I do now every day. And so I do remember that. I also do remember I used to kind of go from my one grandparent's house to another every day. And I would actually go on my uncle's motorcycle to get there. This is way back pre-helmets, pre-safety.
Oh, yeah. You're like, what were they
And
thinking?
so, a 4-year-old just cruising on a motorcycle through Bombay.
And do you have siblings?
I don't. I'm the only one.
You're
And
the
so
only
I think
one.
because of that, growing up, my parents put a big emphasis on, sending me to India, getting me connected to the family. I'm super tight with my family there. I have about 25 first cousins.
So you're close with all your cousins, and they're still there.
They are. And so we go to India very regularly. I took my son for 2 weeks about a year and a half ago, just me and him on a 2-week adventure to India. And we had
I
a great
want you to
time.
help me design a trip there. That's like definitely on my bucket list. But I don't even
100%.
know where to begin because I've
Oh,
got
I
a lot
can-
of friends. I'm very drawn to my Indian friends, and
I
they
can
all
help
have
you.
different opinions. They're like, no, you need to go here. But they have strong opinions in different places.
It's an amazing place. And I would say, just that defining moment of being raised by your grandparents in a different country until you're 4 and kind of the things you learn and who you become, I think it was very defining for me.
What would you say you learned?
I think how to connect to people. And I know it sounds crazy because, it wasn't like I was engaging in like lots of conversation, but I think when you are out there and, kind of, not with your, at least biological parents, you are kind of forced to kind of create relationships, put yourself out
Look
there,
for connection.
connect, look for connection.
Yeah.
And, I think that is the theme of much of my life. And so in some ways, all of this has kind of paid off and it's kind of made me the person I am. But I absolutely looked for connection at a very early age.
And so you then left at 4 and went to Houston?
Yeah, no, by that point, my parents were settled in the country and they moved to New Orleans. And my grandparents actually came, and there was, you can imagine you leave India, you come to the U.S. and you're like, who are you?
Yeah.
Right. And so my grandparents actually lived with us in New Orleans for about 7 months. And then that transition, I do remember this. When my grandparents left after that 7 months, I was very sad. And my dad took me to the movie theater to see E.T. for the first time.
That's just such a sad movie.
It was sad, but
Oh my gosh, I
E.T.
bawled
come
in that
home.
movie. E.T.
I know,
phone
but
home.
I know, but it was a very vivid memory.
Yeah,
and so
I'm
they
sure.
moved, and then after that, obviously I have a great relationship with my parents, and we've been,
Yeah.
We moved
Are
from
you
New
more,
Orleans.
so your mom's a doctor, I'm guessing?
My mom's a doctor. She was the head of the emergency room for pediatric children's hospital emergency room in Pittsburgh. So we ultimately left New Orleans and we moved to Pittsburgh, and she became
For her job?
Yeah, she became a professor of medicine and ultimately, ran that department. And then my dad was a structural civil engineer, and so he was focused on building bridges. Pittsburgh, I don't know if you know, is the city of bridges. We have 63 bridges, and so Pittsburgh made a lot of sense. So we were in New Orleans only for a short amount of time, but Pittsburgh is truly home.
And so how old were you when you moved to Pittsburgh?
So we moved back when I was 4, and we moved to Pittsburgh when I was 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
So young enough that you weren't in that weird, awkward middle school age where you're like the new kid.
No.
Okay.
No.
And would you, I don't know that I can say this in the way that like certain people can't say like Jewish comments, but like my friends who are Indian would be like, well, I was the brown kid. Like, did you feel that way?
I would say it was a big difference moving to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a very, kind of older city, Caucasian city, et cetera. And so I was always the one, typically. I think even in high school with a graduating class of about 550 students, there was
That's
two.
a huge high
it's
school.
huge. It's huge. It's the Bellevue.
There were 2?
No, one in North Allegheny High School.
No, I thought you were going to say there were 2 Indian kids.
Yeah, there was 2. It was me and this guy Amish, who now lives in Atlanta. We know we're brothers.
Yeah, for life.
Yeah, for life. So we're brothers, and we were the 2 Indian kids in that school.
And were you connected still? Because you have a really strong foundation of your culture.
We do.
Like this is just who I am. It's rooted in who you are through your grandparents and generations, and even just geographically living in India. Did you feel like I want to educate people and get them to know who I am, or were you more like I better just disappear and assimilate? Like high school is that age where people want to assimilate.
That's a matter of just self-confidence, and I think that picks up over time.
For sure.
And so I think if I had to look at it, my assimilation, I think that changed. I think once I got to college, it was much more about expressing kind of my Indian background and Indian heritage. I think middle school, and middle school is just a weird time.
Yeah, middle school and high school, you're like, let me just, everybody, my kids are like, I'm going to wear my black leggings and white sweatshirt and tennis shoes like everyone else. I'm like, how about you wear something different?
That's right. So I think, if I had to look at it, it was more assimilation early, but then it evolved. And, I grew up in a great neighborhood. Pittsburgh's a wonderful city. I kind of downplayed it for a number of years, but now every time I go back, I'm just like, wow, this is a great place to grow up. So,
when you say you downplayed it because you met people in school.
Well, because, when you go to college or when I went to business school.
Well, because, I'm looking like Penn State and Wharton. I'm like, you're probably meeting all these like fancy New Yorkers. And you're
absolutely.
like, oh, I'm from Pittsburgh.
So when I was at Wharton and I was at Cambridge in the UK, and everyone's gone to London, Tokyo. And so, through my 20s, I had I grew up in Pittsburgh. And then now, I grew up in Pittsburgh.
I was a little bit like that, even about Seattle, to be totally
Were
frank.
you?
When I was living in New York, people are like, Alaska? I'm like, no, Seattle. I'm like, Washington. They're like, Washington, D.C.? I'm like, no, Seattle. And they're like, who's there? I mean, and I started to get like, ugh. But obviously now I'm back and I love it. And I'm really proud to be from here.
Absolutely.
But it's true. You get a little bit like in cities like that or in places like that, like, Wharton.
Yeah.
I recruited in New York, and a lot of my colleagues were from Wharton and candidates from Wharton, and they're just from similar places.
Well, seems like. I mean, it's funny, even I graduated Wharton now 10 years ago, and moving to Seattle was this kind of counter-cultural.
Of course. You go to investment banking.
Investment banking, private equity, venture capital. A lot of those friends are still in those major cities, but now Seattle, I'm super proud to now say Seattle is home.
For sure.
And now when I go and kind of meet my Wharton, I was just at an alumni event at Wharton about a year ago, and everyone's asking, "Oh, Seattle,
well,
the home of Amazon,
the
home of Microsoft."
Now.
It's the trendy city.
Yeah. So how did you choose Penn State for undergrad?
That was a crazy story. Penn State chose me. So I applied to 13 colleges, and I got rejected by 12 out of the 13, and I only got into Penn State.
All right.
And
was that your safety school?
It was a safety school, and it was a tough one because, I graduated 7th in the class out of 500-ish students.
Holy crap.
And
how did you get rejected from those schools?
I have no idea.
What'd you do wrong, dude?
I did something crazy.
Weren't you like volunteering and
I was doing
working?
I was doing everything.
Your resume shows me like he's got Lazard and he's got the consulting and he's got the London School of Economics. I mean, it's like the perfect resume. So I was assuming that your high school resume was probably similar.
No, Zero. I mean, I had a great high school experience, but something happened. I still remember this day. It was April 6th, 1997.
What?
I literally remember this. And you know how back in the day, this is pre-internet email, you would get envelopes, right? And so I got 12 thin envelopes that came to my house that day.
Yeah, thin is bad.
Thin is bad. And just one after the other, it just kind of kept coming. I was like, okay, the Duke envelope, the Harvard envelope, the Brown envelope, all these schools that, you know, all my counselors were like, Mo, you were destined to go to some Ivy League school. And Penn State was the one envelope that came back as a thick envelope. And I will say the defining moment for me, I'd say in my life, was how my dad reacted at that time. You know, my dad could have said, oh man, what did we do wrong? What happened? And he just said something really simple. All it takes is one. And that's all he said. And he was like, you know, Mo, doesn't matter what the
You're
other
going
12
to college.
said. All it takes is one. Your job now is to maximize your time at Penn State. Penn State's a great school. He went and did research. You know, this is kind of an Indian engineer who grew up in India, came to the country, and was just so proud of the fact that I did get into Penn State. I got a full scholarship to Penn State.
That's amazing.
Penn State Honors Program. And he just said, look, what are you going to do when you show up to campus to maximize that? And I will say that simple philosophy of all it takes is one has been a governing thesis of kind of my life. It just takes one investor, one co-founder, one wife, one house, one everything, right? One everything. And
I love your dad.
And
Is
so
he still alive, your dad?
Absolutely.
I love him. I love hearing when people have these moments, and when people are saying them, they don't even realize it. Your dad probably is like, I said, what? I'm sure he wasn't consciously thinking, I'm defining my son right now.
Well, it was funny. We were just celebrating his 75th birthday in Hawaii, and I raised this. And he totally, it's not that he forgot about it, but I think I just wanted to,
thing.
You know, it was a big thing. I was like, hey, you know, we're spending this intentional time together, so I'm going to be intentional about thanking you for defining my life and just saying, hey, all it takes is one. And I will say ever since then, from starting a company and being like willing to take rejection.
I'm writing it down because my kids don't listen to my podcast. I'm going to be that mom.
Oh, yeah.
All it takes is one.
Mom. All it takes is one. And that's what he said. It was so simple. And
we
I think it's
dad.
been, you know, if I had to look at the history of starting even companies, and, you know, Carrot's not my first company. It just, all it takes is that first customer, that first investor, that first employee, that first partner. And then that's what starts the fire. And you go from there.
Yeah, I love that. Are you more like your mom or your dad?
I'm probably more like my mom.
Yeah.
But my dad and I have a very, I am my mom.
You are.
Like, no, I am mom. Mom and I have a very, you know, we text constantly all the time. When my dad and I talk, it's always really funny. He's got this set of Roman numerals of like, Mohit, I want to cover like steps 1, 2, and 3 with you. But my dad and I have a very special relationship. I think it's been special from the early age, but yeah. My dad started literally a basketball league in Pittsburgh with 3,000 kids when he was an engineer. He never played basketball once in his life, but he realized I loved it. And he starts a league. This is when I was in second grade, and he ran called the North Hills Elementary School Basketball League. I went back to Pittsburgh, and this is crazy.
It's still going?
It's not only still going. I met with the chief people officer of a potential client, and we bonded over North Hills, and she's like, wait, Mo Bhende. Wait, Bhende, like Shailesh Bhende's son?
Are you kidding?
And I was just like, oh yeah, I'm Shailesh Bhende's son. That's who I am. And she's like, oh great, I played North Hills like varsity basketball. I went to college. I started in North Hills Elementary Basketball League.
That is,
and so
I have chills from that. That's awesome.
It's incredible impact. And so
That's
I am my
cool.
mom. I am my mom, and I respect both of my parents deeply. And you know, it was tough, right? Leaving India, coming to the U.S. with nothing, having to make that tough choice of sending me to India. Mm-hmm. That's not easy. I mean, now that I'm a parent of a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old.
It's not easy.
But, you know, it was defining.
But these are some of the best stories that I've heard in my life and also on the podcast, where there's these sacrifices of the generation that came before us.
That's right.
Okay, so $41 million in funding for Carrot. Obviously, it's on way to being extremely successful, and you could have some sort of exit at some point. So it's like, how do you create gritty, driven, values-based children who are being raised probably a little bit different than how you were raised?
You teach them how to get no's. Every day when my son, I think about my son now who's growing up in this, my dad had all of this stuff and he only sees the news and what's happening. I remind him, like literally in Put Down, which I'm the Put Down guy. I'm like the night king. I'm night guy.
Yeah.
I will literally tell him stories of here's no's daddy took today. Right, I got no's from a customer. This person decided to leave my company. here's what happened, just to remind him that, things get hard and that it's not all.
I don't do this. I'm taking notes during yours because
I think
you're like the wise. Is this like a wise? Is this like you're the Calm app coming through?
I think we have a new business.
Taking no's.
Taking no's. Yeah.
It's hard though. Like, I mean, my kids are now teenagers and they're really good kids, very polite, very sweet.
100%.
But I'm like, are you going to follow through on that?
100%. I think
hard.
My wife and I think about this all the time. How do we make sure our kid doesn't think that Whistler and Hawaii and stuff is life,
reality.
but that you got to work for it and you got to work hard.
You do have to work for it. Well, it sounds like your parents obviously did a great job. And how has being an only child shaped you?
That's been very defining. I think it was very important. I will say I missed having kind of an older sibling, especially. I think I've always wanted to have an older brother. I think I missed a lot of that.
You wanted to get the crap beat out of you.
Yeah, totally. It's kind of funny.
That's what big brothers do.
It's kind of funny. My co-founder's one of 4, and he's the youngest, and so he always tells these stories about him getting. But now, ironically, he's the big guy.
Yeah.
In the family.
Is he older than you?
He's only 1. We're the same age.
So does he beat up on you to make you feel better?
I don't know. I mean, he's definitely he can throw down in the gym, but I think being an only child, it was defining also from the same framework of creating relationships and creating connections. When you're the only child and you don't have inbuilt just, I come home and there's entertainment or arguments being kind of waiting for you.
You have to navigate them.
You got to go find it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another theme in my life. One is taking notes, but the other one is you got to go create it. You got to go find it.
Yeah.
And so I think early on, being an only child, you got to go create your community. You got to go create your relationships. And so I was very proactive in how I created relationships and how I created friendships.
Yeah.
And I will say, my best friend, Brad, we've been best friends for, I don't know, since I was throwing dunks on him in basketball. I wasn't dunking on him, but no, I can't. But if he lets to this podcast, he's gonna tell you a different story.
Yeah, Brad will be like, whatever, Mo.
But he and I have been best friends since 8th, 9th grade, and I think you cultivate those relationships, and that matters.
And so, since you are, and we've discussed this, so we're both kind of like people, and so I'm assuming you have a lot of relationships. What do you value most in your relationships?
I think that authenticity and intention. I just love the real talk and just kind of what we're doing right here, which is, we're not having let's kind of pump our chest and kind of talk about what's all great. I just love relationships when we can kind of get real and get real pretty quick.
And so how do you find time to balance, you've got your business, which we haven't even gotten to.
Yeah.
And wife and kids and lots of friendships.
It's changed, to be very honest. The number of relationships, my priorities right now, stack ranked, around my family, myself, my business.
Your
I
health.
don't spend my health. I don't spend much time outside of that. So I think it's just changed. And it's kind of funny. I was actually chatting about this with my wife, that I'm just intentional about my relationships now. And it's okay to drop relationships or kind of forget now. Because, there's a lot of commitments and time in life. And so I think I'm just very intentional about who, when, and how.
Yeah. And I probably a lot of people want to be around you. You've got good energy. And so you draw people in and then you're like, yeah, no, I'm going to have to cut you out.
Yeah. Or you're just polite about it. Or you, you put people, if someone wants advice about business, you think about, okay, am I the right person or can I point you to somebody else? And it's not punting, but it's just saying, well, Yeah, you think about that.
There's a woman here in town that I ask a lot for kind of mentorship, and she'll often say, because I can be intentional in my mind, but not put it to practice as far as how I implement my days. And so I'm constantly doing these random favors. And I'm like, I just kind of had this weird day of nothing. I didn't really do anything productive, but I did do a lot of favors. She's like, well, just set aside a day, a month or a day a week, for those kind of coffees and random calls with the people that might want mentorship or advice. Or, and in our industry, everyone's calling for that.
Everyone's calling.
Hey, thinking about a new job. You don't want to blow them off.
Totally.
But it's hard. It's hard to balance it all.
I do think that there's a huge untapped opportunity in kind of relationship software or relationship management software. It's crazy to me that, the way my mind works is I have a conversation with someone. I remember specific facts. I remember where we were. It's just how I'm wired. But most people can't do that.
Most people don't do that.
And they don't do that. So I think, crazily enough, I actually think there's a huge entrepreneurial opportunity.
I completely agree. And when you start it,
yeah, great.
Let's do it together.
We'll
don't talk about it too much.
Okay,
Sign
fine.
an NDA, everybody. We have a new business.
We got a new business.
Everybody, don't take our idea.
Yes.
Okay, so Were you talk about intention? You've used that word a lot, which I love. Were you intentional about, again, creating this kind of perfect resume with investment banking and consulting? Both of these companies were clients of mine, Lazard Frères, Oliver Wyman, ironically, but it's like the perfect resume.
It's kind of funny because after getting all those 12 no's and going to Penn State, I had this weird thing initially around having to collect brand names. And then one of my early bosses said, Mo, you don't have to do that anymore. So do what you want to do. And I think that put me on this kind of path that I am now.
Well, now you've got Carrot, which is now the brand name.
Yeah, Carrot's a brand, but I
now
think
it's a brand. But you did do it. I mean, this was a great. You definitely did do it. I mean, those are great companies.
They're great companies. I mean, there's in between Lazard and Oliver Wyman, I did work at my professor's startup, which scaled. It was very random. It was in the asbestos space. We would mine asbestos data. This is way back when.
Sounds
and my
awful.
my girlfriend at the time, now my wife and mother of my children, said, Mo, what are you doing? Is that the purpose that you want? And I said, absolutely, you're right. I'm not. And so I moved to Oliver Wyman. But I do, look, each of those opportunities were learning opportunities. And a lot of those folks are actually involved in Carrot in different ways. And so the way I just look at life is just, compounding relationships.
Oh, for sure.
And so some of those folks I work with at Oliver Wyman, are investors in our business. Some of the folks, I've got a ton of our clients who
I wish
come
I had
from
known.
Microsoft.
I would have put some money in early on.
Hey.
Now I'm too late. I would do some trades.
It's never too late.
So when you were working, what cities were you doing these Lazard? Was this in New York?
Lazard was in London.
Oh, London.
And then
okay.
talk about a crazy interaction. The Lazard one, and it's interesting that I'm now doing a company on interviewing. Another defining moment in my life was I had an interview at the end of my internship with Lazard, William Rucker, CEO of Lazard UK, and he just looked me right in the eye. I had crushed in the internship and he said, Mo, you're not getting a job here full time. And I said, well, why not? And he said, because you're an entrepreneur and you just don't know it yet. And
That's so funny. That's my next question. I love that.
And I said, William, like what? I literally just sent him a LinkedIn note out of the blue 20 years later and said, actually, as it turns out, you're right. I am an entrepreneur and that's literally my persona. That's who I am. And I was 22 at the time. I had, just worked so hard that summer to get the full-time job. And he just said, we're going to do business together someday, sometime.
How did he know?
I think that's what good leaders do. You spot talent in any profession, right? Even if he's an investment banker, he knows what makes an investment banker tick. And I just don't have that, right? I'm wired differently.
Yeah.
And so William Rucker, shout out to him, played a great service in my life to point me in a different direction. He's actually getting the no from Lazard is actually what drove me to join my professors at their startup, which was the asbestos company.
Yeah.
And then I ended up joining Oliver Wyman after that. But, even though the resume looks clean and looks great, there's always a story.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no. And I always talk about kind of reading the white part of the paper, not the written part. It's like how the decisions got made, who played those roles. And sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, I just met somebody like randomly on the airplane and we started talking.
That's right.
And that's how these are. It's not always the standard through a recruiting agency or through a company or through sending in your resume in some way. And I do think that when doors close,
other doors open.
And I love, love, love that he recognized that. When did you recognize that you had at least leadership skills?
I think starting my first business. So I was, this is around the time of Lazard. Actually, right before that, basically a couple friends of mine and I had an idea to start a magazine. And so we started a business called Topic Magazine. 9/11 had just happened. And so the idea was that we were going to create a publication of like real first-person human stories. Our first issue was on war, where we had everyone from Jose Ramos Horta, the Nobel Peace Prize winner from East Timor, write an article.
Wow.
To, people like, people in the army. We published an issue on food where we had Kobayashi, the guy who ate 99 hot dogs in 10 minutes, write an article.
Coney Island.
He literally wrote an article about the 99th hot dog and how that felt.
Yeah.
And so we created a whole publication. I realized not only just leadership, but that I just love business. I love creating businesses. And, it was just a fun ride.
How long did you have that business and what ultimately happened?
We got to 20,000 readers and, 20,000 like readership at the time.
Okay.
So, by the way, the business, we started with some funding from the Gates Foundation. So I went to Cambridge on the Bill and Melinda Gates, created a thing called the Gates Scholarship.
Yeah.
And kind of rather than always studying, I basically pitched Bill Gates' dad for some seed capital.
Yeah.
And so we got $100,000 from them to start the business. And I'll never forget, we printed our first 5,000 issues, and my business partner at the time, David Haskell, and I literally went door to door in London in our friend's car, and I just went and sold it. And just took a copy of the magazine, and my prices fluctuated every time. I'm like, oh, will you drive? It was like 8 quid, 7 quid, 6 quid. Oh, wait, no? Okay. And we literally financed our next operation off of that, and we created a business model ultimately where we got sponsorships.
I was going to say, what was the business model? How'd you make money?
It was subscription plus advertising, but ultimately we realized that actually selling entire issues to brands made more sense. Look, the real talk is magazines are wonderful things to run, but terrible businesses. Like the unit economics of running a magazine is nothing like running a software company or what have you.
Yeah. And so tell me, I mean, obviously you learned a ton there, but I was surprised when I was researching you. I knew that you had worked at Microsoft because that's where you were when I met you. But going from kind of this startup thing to a company like Microsoft.
It was a huge transition.
Were you like, what? I can't really picture you in a big company.
I actually still can't believe I did it.
I can't picture you there. And I do think that it was Seb that introduced us. Because now I'm remembering. Yeah, I feel like it was because I remember meeting you at that Starbucks and I love Seb. So I was like, any friend of Seb's.
Seb's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So
why
how
Microsoft?
was Microsoft for you?
So I got an internship there in the corporate strategy group. And what I was shocked about is Microsoft at the time, and I still think now, is just a consortium of tons of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs building products and building their visions and creating something bigger than themselves. And so honestly, I just showed up with literally what you were thinking, which is, wow, how am I going to do at a big company? And I just loved it. I loved everything about Microsoft. Yeah. I think it's honestly a wonderful company. And so I showed up that summer. And when I took the job to come back, I literally wrote my own job description. My boss at the time, I actually spoke with him this morning, Charlie Songhurst. I put a business plan to him to say, send me to China. I'm going to go run our venture capital fund in China. And he said yes. And so Microsoft is the type of place that let me be highly enterprising. So from 2008 to 2010, we lived in Beijing. We created a $200 million investment fund with Chinese government. And we went and did joint ventures out there, started up new companies.
That's amazing.
And so I got to have a very enterprising experience at Microsoft.
Yeah.
And then Xbox, where I then landed up. Xbox is I don't think it gets credit enough from going from 0 to 10 billion revenue in the time. Shout out to Robbie Bach, Jay Allard, Mark Whitten, all of those leaders that, frankly, I got to just learn from. They are amazing leaders. Mm-hmm. It was a highly entrepreneurial place. So I guess the short of it is I was never in the core Windows product or the core Microsoft Office.
Right.
I was doing venture investing and venture creation, and then I was doing Xbox, which was highly enterprising.
Yeah.
And if I think about it now, so many of my colleagues from Xbox have become entrepreneurs or leading companies. It's that type of place.
Yeah.
And that's when I read Hit Refresh, it was honestly, ironically refreshing because I just realized, wow, it's getting its old mojo back. Mm-hmm. And there's just this, DNA of people that are coming back.
Yeah, I love that. And so did you, when you were there, have a pain point around interviewing engineers?
Yeah, that's how the business literally started.
Because that's when I met you. That's what I remember you being like, this is a pain. And I was like, yes, indeed.
So it's funny. My mentor, Sarah Clemens, she's now CEO of Twitch. She was my boss at Microsoft. She made this great comment. I'm realizing through this conversation, there's just vivid moments. William Rucker, my dad, Sarah Clemens, right? And Sarah Clemens said, Mo, you spend more time recruiting and hiring than actually doing your job. So why don't you just make that your job, right? Yeah. It was so simple. And she just
because you enjoyed it, or because
I just love
you were better at it than everyone else?
Because I just love it.
Yeah.
I just love connecting people, and I love hiring, and I love interviewing. And so I was constantly thinking about new ways to hire, new ways to interview. It's just what I do. Mm-hmm. And so the way Carrot kind of unfolded was we were hiring 400 engineers at that time into what now became the HoloLens, which is Alex Kipman's group. And all the business problems we're facing, the sheer amount of time that our engineers were spending interviewing versus coding was significant. Mm-hmm. Very few of those engineers were trained in how to be good at interviewing. It's not your day job. And on top of that, at that point in time, now this is 5 years ago, Google was scaling up here. Amazon, as you can tell in the Seattle market, it's totally scaled up. Mm-hmm. It was just more competitive to get to talent. And so it still is. And so it was crazy to me of why are we asking candidates to take time out of their day on a Monday to make time for us as Microsoft. Why aren't we meeting them and treating them as customers and interviewing them on a Sunday? And then I realized that, we couldn't do that. And at that same time, my co-founder was doing kind of research on job experiences and kind of candidate processes at the Gates Foundation, put our heads together. And that's the infamous Crystal Mountain trip where we were skiing.
So you're buds and you're out skiing.
Yeah, we were out skiing, and we were frankly looking for, Jeff had some crazy ideas around like saving the U.S. Post Office, which I'm glad we didn't pursue. But we're out skiing and talking about, wow, here's this just huge problem, right? If you think about it, every company is becoming a software company. Every company has to hire engineers. Because of that, every company has to interview. And interviewing is the thing that connects people to opportunity. And yet it's super haphazard, unprofessional, and very time consuming. Mm-hmm. And so how do we change that? And I think the thing about Carrot, what's interesting is we focus on a very specific moment in time. This whole conversation that I'm realizing you and I are having has been about key moments in life. Mm-hmm. Interviewing is a moment, right?
Oh, for sure. Everybody remembers that.
It is the moment that you're like, hey, I really want this job. How's that moment going to go? Is it going to be professional? Is the interviewer going to show up on time? Am I going to be asked fair questions? Is it going to be enjoyable, predictive, fair, our mission? And I think, nailing that moment and making it very professional is at the core of Carrot, because I think our thesis is that if we make that moment, something that works, then everything else works from that.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me how it exactly works. So a company like some of these companies that I mentioned, you've got a lot of obviously kick-ass clients. So an Intuit, they need to hire engineers. So they partner with you.
Correct.
And then your team does the interview engineering.
So what we do is we've made interviewing a job. We call it interview engineering. So just like you have back-end engineers and front-end engineers, we like to think we've created the profession of interview engineering. Mm-hmm. So we have a global network now of software engineers all around the world who we have equipped to be professional interviewers. Mm-hmm. We call them interview engineers. And so the way the model works is Intuit recruits the candidates, and they send us, let's say, 4,000 candidates, right? 5,000, 10,000. Our interview engineers then interview those candidates using Carrot's questions, our platform, our software. And then we're the company that tells Intuit, hey, of the 100 people you sent us, here's the 10 who are the most qualified for the job technically. And then the ROI of that is super simple. We have saved Intuit a massive amount of developer time.
Ridiculous amount of time.
And on top of that time, because interviewing is all we do, we've now done over 60,000 interviews. It's the only thing we do.
Are you calling on behalf of Intuit when you're calling?
No, the way it's framed to the candidate is Intuit, really values kind of taking out bias out of hiring, having a flexible candidate experience. We've partnered with Carrot. They're our trusted interviewing partner, and Carrot is going to conduct this interview with you. Mm-hmm. And so it is a Carrot interview engineer who is conducting that interview. Mm-hmm. And so the way it shows up to the candidate is, okay, great. Intuit cares so much about their hiring that they're going to partner with the world's leading interviewing firm. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to get an experience that's on my time, right? We interview 24/7. So 60% of candidates choose to interview on Sundays, Saturdays, Friday nights. Saturday morning at 10 is by far, that's like go time at Carrot.
Yeah.
That's when a candidate wants to be interviewed. And so the value prop to the candidate is I'm going to get an interview engineer that's professional, shows up on time, is there to kind of help me put me in the best light to Intuit. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do.
And so what about, because obviously we're having to deal with this also, and our biggest practice area is our engineering team as far as our recruiters, but we could have somebody that doesn't pass the coding challenge at one company and then they get hired at another. So is there a standardized hey, we just know because we're engineers that this person's going to qualify?
No, so we've basically built the software that we have built is all around both empowering our interview engineer to get the most signal, right? But also the software we've built is around, we call it alignment engineering. So we've built a whole discipline around how to do job analysis on what companies are hiring for, how to connect that job analysis to the right interview formats. Mm-hmm. We then track on-site notes and on-site kind of details, and we kick that back to our interview, and we're constantly refining the interview so that it's more and more predictive. And so the way to think about us is as a platform, we build content, but then we calibrate and curate that content by client. And so the framing back to the candidate is look, we've partnered with Intuit. We've conducted thousands of interviews for Intuit. This is grounded in kind of a deep understanding of what Intuit needs. And I think the most interesting thing that we've been able to do with our clients is actually shift their perception of what they need, right? Every client starts with, hey, I think I'm hiring a back-end engineer, and I think they have to be great at data structures, algorithms. They have to be great at everything. And I think what we're realizing is we play this really interesting role in the value chain where we can kind of go back to the client and say, hey, based on who you ultimately hire, ultimately based on how they perform in the job, actually it turns out that those data structures and algorithms, they're important, but actually it turns out that these other 5 things are important. And so let's go redesign the interview. And so our product looks closer to SaaS, which is constantly evolving, constantly serving, constantly improving, than kind of a monolithic, hey, here's an interview and good luck. And so the very nature of our product is to constantly evolve and get more aligned and get better. And that's kind of how we've built it.
And the companies that you mentioned are larger companies.
Yes.
Do you work with small companies?
We do. I mean,
is it just like cost prohibitive or like,
no.
we partner with you?
Shauna, we'll start a business together and we'll partner together. But
I'm just saying, like, in general, everybody's trying to save time. I mean, at the end of the day, as recruiters, I'm like, my parents and I will sit down and be like, how do we scale my business faster?
Yeah.
And it's like, just hire more recruiters, save them more time. I mean, they can't work harder. They're working their tails off. And so it is just trying to figure this out. Like, how do we save these candidates time? Because one of the things that I'm constantly consulting on is the candidate experience too. It's crappy.
We do too.
It's crappy. And companies, I'll meet with CEOs and they're like, it's my most important job.
Yeah, but they don't.
And then they don't prioritize it.
That's
and I'm
right.
like, yeah, you didn't get back to the person for 3 weeks, kept them waiting, had them come in for 4 hours, do a take home, and then they never heard from you again. And it's putting my brand on the line.
On the line. Yeah. So at a high level, I mean, the reason I'm, excited about Carrot is our total market is huge. Interviewing is ubiquitous. So just like Amazon Web Services is ubiquitous, every company could use cloud. Every company interviews, right? Whether it's a small company hiring one engineer or IBM, right? So I think we've had to, in a situation where we've got kind of a ubiquitous utility, if you will, get really focused on who we're going to serve. We basically have 2 offerings in the market now. We do have the startup offering, and then we have the enterprise offering. So the enterprise offering doesn't just include the interviews. It actually includes a full platform where we configure workflows of those interviews in their environment. We help with things like tracking candidates over time. We give benchmarking and analytics. We spend a ton of time with CTOs of these large enterprises answering questions like, how diverse is your funnel? How much are you paying your engineers? How good are your engineers relative to your competitors? Right? So there's an entire
That's amazing.
consultative layer and platform layer. But for startups, so if you are a Series A, B, C, D company, you probably aren't at the stage where you need, Carrot platform and Carrot consultation. What you really need is just Carrot interviews. And so we've literally created a startup offering, which we started about 18 months ago. We have a woman, Claire Tokum, who's running this business now and is scaling it very quickly. And so I would say at a high level, if it is a startup, we can absolutely help them. The offering, though, is much more kind of, I would say, standardized interviews to say, hey, startup, do you want a world-class machine learning or world-class data engineering interview? Whereas for an enterprise, we're going to do the things I was talking about earlier, where we're going to constantly tweak that interview so that it configures to their environment.
Are there certain roles that you'll partner on, or all engineering roles?
I'd say our core, is back end, front end, like all your typical roles. Yeah. There are certain roles, like, I think that, or if it's hyper niche and you need some very specific graphics engineer at NVIDIA, probably not. But, the 80% to 90% of roles at a company, we can service. Yeah. And I'd say our kind of core roles, I get this question a lot of, hey, is Carrot just really good for university or early career? It turns out 70 to 80% of our volume are engineers between 5 to 15 years of experience. And so interestingly, those are the senior engineers that actually really value, I'm getting interviewed on a Sunday. We give every candidate no questions asked redo. Not happy with your Carrot interview? Think you could have done better? Fine. You're the customer. We'll give you a new interviewer, new interview engineer, new day, new question. Those
and
things
are these
don't
interview
happen.
Engineers doing this as like a side job, or is this their full-time gig?
That's changed over time. So I'd say when we first met 4 years ago, it was, side job. And now it is, I'm building an interviewing business on Carrot's platform.
It's awesome. I think you were, when I first met you, doing some sort of video component.
We are.
And so is that also include, how do you get around the, how do I...
GDPR and like all of those things?
Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, every candidate gets kind of an ability to say, do I want to be videotaped? Do I not want to be videotaped? It's just, 99 point. I think I saw the stat today, like literally it's like less than 0.1% actually, interestingly, disagree. Our sign-up rates are like north of 90%. So again, you build a flexible, candidate responsive experience with a professional interviewing and they want it.
Yeah.
I think as it relates to the platform, we're doing it all live over video. There's pair programming. And so what the client gets back is a video of the entire interview. It's fully transparent. It's auditable, right? A benchmark report where we will compare that candidate to every other candidate we've interviewed, a recommendation of how to proceed with the candidate. And I think that honestly, Sean, we're just getting started, right? I think for us, as we think about where the roadmap could go, ultimately it kind of comes back to, finding what are those unique strengths about candidates? How do we tell their story? And so I think as we grow as a company, our vision ultimately is to, get the most adaptive and most highest signal out of that interview as possible.
Yeah, this is so interesting, this timing of this conversation, because when I was in the business, I've been in it since a long time, really long time.
It's a good business. So
it's a great business. So for 25 years, and I think maybe 15, maybe 20 years ago, the CEO of my first company wanted to launch something together, and he wanted to call it, I think it was called something like Prove It or something. We wanted to basically stamp candidates. It's like, this person has been signed, sealed, and delivered. We can validate this person.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was no videoing. I mean, we didn't have access to video. And there was all sorts of legalities around it and all sorts of limitations. But we just felt like it was something that could be scaled.
It's funny.
That seems like that could be something cool for you.
To
just be like, okay, this is Carrot certified. And then I could know, okay, guys, interview the person, and I feel confident that you can send them and we can save our clients time. If I could say to my clients, hey, we've done the sourcing, like that's half the problem, is that when you're thinking of all the steps of recruiting, there's the sourcing, the process, the interviewing, all of it, the closing, the onboarding.
Yeah.
So it's trying to figure out what their pain point is.
Yeah, and the other issue in that is not only there are a lot of steps, but because there are a lot of steps, there's a lot of ability for a lot of signals in those steps, right? So think about the typical company. They have, say a client has 1,000 engineers. Those 1,000 engineers might be interviewing 1,000 different ways. So you suddenly have 1,000 times 1,000 and your signal is all over the place. And
or 1,000 different ideas of what the job that they need.
Exactly.
Or the worst is when they put somebody in the loop that's unhappy.
That's exactly right.
That's unbelievable when that happens. You're like, really?
Really? Why are you doing this? And so I think what we've learned, it's something really simple, but because we've made that one moment in the value chain of recruiting very qualitative and quantitative and consistent, we can measure every other part of the process. How efficient is your sourcing? How efficient are your recruiters? How good are your on-site loops? Those are all questions that our clients can now answer because they can use the Carrot data as the benchmark. And I think that was the unlock for our business to go from, hey, we do your interviews to you're building your entire interviewing process and you're running on Carrot. And that is ultimately, when I look at us as a platform company and where we're growing, ultimately, I want every company to interview the Carrot way. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where we're progressing.
Well, you'll do it if anyone can do it.
I hope so.
You're definitely going to do it. But I have a couple more questions about Carrot from backtracking to understand Jeff. He's your co-founder?
Jeff's my co-founder. Jeff was the chief of staff at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to Melinda Gates, and he did that for 4 years. He's got a very interesting background. Kind of like me, he took a gamble, went to China for 3 years, and right out of undergrad, didn't take the job at Goldman Sachs. Jeff actually got the job. I got told no from Lazard. Jeff got the job at some fancy bank.
Hopefully he's had a no in his life.
I know Jeff's definitely had no's. But then he, moved over to China and then kind of found his way to Seattle, and here we are.
Yeah. I'm always interested when I meet people with co-founders. Is it a chicken and egg thing where you're like, I just know I want to be in business with you, or like, hey, let's come up with an idea, or hey, you've got this skill set and it's opposite of mine, so they complement one another? Or how many conversations do you have about your vision? Are we on the same page? Money, all of it. Like, when do those conversations happen?
They happen all the time, and they don't stop happening. And I think, we use this analogy at Carrot, and I'll describe my relationship and how we've grown through the laps of our company. We like to say we're in lap 4 of Carrot. So lap 1 was, will anyone buy this crazy idea? Lap 2 was, oh my God, we sold it. Will it work? Lap 3 was, okay, if Jeff and I aren't in the room to sell and operate it, will it work? Now we're in lap 4, which is scaling, right? So I think to have a really effective relationship with a business partner, co-founder, whatever you want to call it, it starts with shared values. And so I think Jeff and I have a very simple shared alignment on hierarchy. We both value our families. We both value our health. And that actually comes first. And I think we're very intentional about leading our company with that. And then we both believe jobs are obviously very important and our business is very important. But I think part 1 is that shared understanding of how we're going to interact as a team. And, if something is up with my kid one day or something's up with his kid or my wife needs me, oh yeah. And that's just how we roll.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of relationships, if you don't have that shared value system, Jeff also has an extremely strong, he's got a super tight relationship with all of his brothers. His mom and dad are awesome. I've spent time with them in San Diego. So I think part of that is that family structure. I think the second thing is how to make good decisions, right? So we both kind of come from the cloth of, I know now SoftBank companies are getting lots of press of just kind of going nuts. Look, we want to grow our business and grow it really fast.
But I
think we're also, though, both in it to build, like Carrot, we've always talked about building a company that's bigger than ourselves. Carrot for me is not the Jeff Mo, show. It's a vision, it's a mission that's bigger. And I think finding a business partner that aligns to that, where you take out ego and you solve for the business as a whole and your vision as a whole, that is hard to find. And look, the real talk is obviously there's tensions and things that come up. It's just natural relationships. But in some ways, it's not that different than having a family, right? Like my wife and I actually spend a lot of intentional time, back to that word intentional, saying, how do we want to partner? And now the Bhende family is just bigger than ourselves. Carrot is bigger than ourselves, right? And so I think if you can find co-founders, for anyone else trying to start a company that has shared values, meets shared kind of egoless, in service of, if you think about Carrot as a company, we are in service of, we're a solutions company. And so it kind of makes sense that you've got two folks who came from those backgrounds. And so it's very unique. But I would say we reorient and rethink, every year and a half on great, where are we at in the journey? What are we focusing on next?
Yeah.
It's fun, man.
It sounds like you're having
honestly,
a blast.
I'm having a blast.
How was the fundraising process for you? I feel like a lot of people are like, it sucks, but I can see you really
I love fundraising.
Enjoying it.
I totally.
Knowing your personality, I'm I can see you rocking fundraising.
And Jeff gives me kind of, it's so funny because he knows
I want to go do this again.
Yeah, I want to go fundraise. Fundraising is really fun until you get to a certain moment in the process. When you're in the courting process of, hey, our business is great, you're great, we're great, you're going to come see us, etc., it's great. You get very exposed when you send your numbers and your data, and then they go into the data room, air quotes, and then you wait, right? And
How long do you wait?
You wait, it could be a day, it could be an hour, it could be a week, or it could be our partners at Tiger Global who are frankly awesome, and they just showed up to Seattle and said, great, we're interested, because they'd already done their research before meeting us.
Didn't they also invest in Kabir?
Yeah, Shahani.
Yeah,
Kabir's an investor in Carrot as well. But fundraising, I think fundraising is fun, but ultimately Carrot, we're trying to build a business. And back to the whole kind of, Silicon Valley mentality, I think part of what's amazing about building and being an entrepreneur in Seattle is you get to build companies and build businesses. Carrot's got a lot of legs to be a real kind of long-standing, hopefully large and important company. And so for me, fundraising is a means to an end. But every day when we close that round, we've now closed 3 rounds, that's just the beginning. And to say, okay, great, time to get to work.
You've raised a ton of money, though. I knew it because I had read it. And then when I was researching, I was like, I just felt proud. Because when you're friends with someone and you see them and they're like, I have this idea. And you were so full of life around this idea.
Yeah.
That I was like,
I don't even know what idea was it.
But it was kind of I think this is a pain point.
Yeah. It was a hunch.
The fact that you actually did it is really cool. A lot of people want to do it, but they don't have the courage or the whats to do it.
Well, the thing about fundraising, and this comes back to all it takes is one. It just takes one.
Yeah, so you also got baller investors.
Well, because but in the seed round, I got how many no's? 14 no's in that.
Not that you were counting.
Yeah, but I got every 14 no's. I'm like, okay, great. You don't want to put money in our company? Fine. But 8 VC took a bet. In our A round, Parker Burrell, our investor at Norwest, he took a bet. Scott Schleifer, partner at Tiger, he took a bet, right? So I just think all it takes is one. And I think the key thing that I've learned in fundraising is back to what makes co-founder relationships work. Same thing with investor relationships. We got over the line with Tiger Global when we were chatting with Scott just about, family. And, he negotiated the deal like literally mid-dinner and a family dinner, and then he had to leave because his family needed him. I love that.
Yeah,
and
you're
literally,
like, done and done, please say
no,
yes. I want to be in business with you.
Literally when he did that, Jeff and I, because he kind of left and Jeff and I were just on kind of mute with each other, we're like, okay, let's go do business with this guy. Let's just lock it in right now, right? And that, I think if you're clear on what you solve for and what you look for, you just know.
Yeah.
Because all it takes is one.
Yeah. I'm guessing that you probably are finding time to read, or no? I'm thinking...
More so now than I did previously. I think my entire relationship with myself has honestly changed. I think 4 years ago, when we were first meeting at that coffee shop and this idea, so obsessed about just the core kernel of the idea that I couldn't stop not working. And now I'm like, oh no, I need to work out. I need to read.
Or do both at the same time.
Do both at the same time. So I was just reading I just finished The Originals this morning by Adam Grant. I love everything that Adam Grant writes.
Okay, so I'm obsessed with Adam Grant. I just heard him speak in person, and then I listened to him on a couple podcasts. I love him. And I have a few of his books that I'm happy to... It sounds like you already have them, but there was one that he gave
Give and Take?
me. Give and Take.
Yeah, that's my book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a couple must-have reads at Carrot. Give and Take, Who, Mindset. These are all companies that when you join our company, we kind of give you a copy. But I think Give and Take...
I have them all. We have a book club, but I'm the one in the company who doesn't read them.
Are you taking down another note
here?
Yeah. Okay.
Because I have this book.
Give and Take's
but
great.
I just put it on the bookshelf. I didn't read it.
Yeah. No, I'd say the thing I probably read every day is The Information.
Mindset is the Sweck or whatever.
Carol Schweck.
Carol Schweck.
I can't pronounce her name.
Schweck.
Yeah. It's a good book.
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't know how, I just am like on the reading.
I know.
I listen to podcasts.
You listen to podcasts, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I do. And so
I don't, honestly, to be transparent, I don't read nearly the amount that I would probably like to read, but
yeah.
I love business books. I'm kind of, I love leadership books. It's just, I actually love personality books. The next book I'm going to read is the Bob Iger book, the Disney CEO, just about his learnings.
Bob
Robert
Iger. Yeah. Okay.
No, so I just love books. So as you can tell, I love the Satya Nadella book. I love, so I just like reading. My favorite book of all time, this is super back, shout out to India, was Business Maharajas. It sounds completely crazy now, but Business Maharajas is the story of Ambani, of Hero Honda, of all of the entrepreneurs in India that have built great businesses.
Oh.
And it's like literally a book, and I love short stories.
I do
so
too.
In Business Model, it's written by a woman named Geeta Piramal.
And I can't write that fast, so you'll text that to me
I will,
later.
but every 20, 30 pages is about a different Indian entrepreneur and about their story.
Oh, I
and
love
they
it.
all have, by the way, they all have tons and tons of no's. Tons. Oh my God. Ambani starting his business, which is now Reliance Industries, largest company, thousands of no's. And so, you read that book and you're like, let's go.
The theme of grit.
Let's go.
And so 2 more questions. One is, how have you changed since becoming a dad?
Yeah.
To your boys?
I've got a boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're such a... for some reason I was picturing 2 boys.
No, so my
girl's you melting as a...
My girl's 4.
Oh yeah.
And my boy's 7.
Okay.
How have I changed? Back to intention. I'm much more efficient with my time. So yesterday, Celtic was having their soccer tryouts. Me and, I was like literally out 2 hours getting rained on watching my boy try out for the team with Gatorade in hand. And, I'm very focused.
Oh, that's good.
I love sports. So I was watching Jane just play and I'm like, you go, man.
That's awesome.
And so I was giving him the talk beforehand. So I think highest level, how has it changed me as a dad? It's just being very focused and realizing that quality doesn't equal effectiveness. And so I think the way I structure my day has totally changed. Mm-hmm. I love doing either morning drop off or pickup. It's just what I do. And so my whole thing is, if you're going to start a company, do it the way you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The whole reason in some ways to not be a corporate executive and to be an entrepreneur is to say, great, I'm going to do family dinner every night from 6 to 8 because that's just how we do. And that's what you do. And
that's
I think
great.
it's hopefully, do I cook? Nowhere near at the caliber of my wife, so I will not.
Good.
Yeah, I'm a short order cook, is what I would say. So I'm the morning breakfast guy because I'm the morning guy.
Fried eggs.
So I'm doing, eggs, pancakes. Yeah. I got short order cook down.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And so my final question is, what fuels you?
Creating relationships and connecting people. That's just what I do. So ever since that time in India to kind of be out there creating relationships from the start. I just love connecting people. It's just what I do.
You're good at it.
Thank you.
It's good that you're going to get paid for it. That's what I always joke. I'm like, oh my God, I'm making money doing what I do.
I know. And to me, interviewing is nothing about finding what's great in people and then connecting them to opportunity. And the fact that I just get to come into work every day, sometimes I can like pinch myself. I'm like, oh my God, this is kind of
it's the
this
best.
is amazing.
But we can't tell everybody else about it.
Yeah,
but it is
what
the best.
I do.
It's the best kept secret. And you're fueling the economy, so you're also helping the world. So It's great. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So fun.
Thank you. This is fun.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.